Okay, welcome back. We're still on page 399, talking about managing communications and the need to basically to keep track of the changes that you made to your management plan. So when it come time to managing communications, electronic techniques are, there's lots of technology that you can use to help out. Email and instant messaging and websites and all those kinds of things. Now, on the other hand, using technology could be a liability. I mean, they show some examples about, there was an earthquake in Nepal and basically all of the communication systems were out and people started, being able to talk using old style ham radios as their technique for being able to communicate. So you kind of sort of need to have an alternate technique as well, some sort of a backup plan. So selecting methods and media. So on page 401, they talk about 3 broad classifications, right, of how to do this. The interactive. So interactive is, where other people have an opportunity to provide input, right? It's not a one-way street. So this is any one of the face-to-face types we talked about, being able to be on the phone or, video teleconferencing, those kinds of things. And then there's push kinds of things. So pushing information means I regularly provide you an email blast or something, or I post something on the web every week, and so I just push it to you. You don't ask for it. I just give it to you. Okay. And the last one is pull. And pull basically means I wait for you to ask for something, and then when you ask for it, I provide it. Okay. So 3 broad classifications: interactive, which is right, face-to-face and where I can talk back. Push means I unilaterally just push things to you unsolicited, sort of like spam, except hopefully in this case it's not spam. But I just push it to you without you asking for it. And then pull is you have to say, "Mother, may I?" And yes, I'll provide you the information. This is really cool media choice table. So it talks about, let's say for example, I'm expressing support or appreciation. Okay. The number one place you'd want to do that is hard copy, and then followed by a telephone call and maybe voicemail or email or blah 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 blah. Let's go to one that's this exact opposite. I'm trying to mediate a conflict. I am probably not going to mediate a conflict hard copy, right? Like writing them a letter. No, probably not going to try to mediate a conflict over the phone. Or leaving a voicemail. Oh boy, that'll help. I need to have a meeting. So this is pretty cool stuff on what the problem is you're trying to solve, and then all these technologies that you could use. So this is an excellent little guide to look at. The next thing they talk about is reporting performance. So remember how we're supposed to be collecting information about performance of a project, and then using that to figure out if everything's okay, or if you may make changes, or perhaps it's even being used for bonuses and things of that nature. Well, one of the stories that I talk about is I had this project, and it was a year-long project, and it was very complex and had lots and lots of people in it. And we had a team of 6 people. What I had access to a plotter. What a plotter basically is just a giant inkjet printer. It's an inkjet printer that is 3 feet wide. And so I would print this Gantt chart, and it was like 5 by 3 feet. It was monstrous, like a giant poster. And I would stick that on the wall behind my desk, and I'd update it, every couple of weeks to show where we are. And every once in a while, some, visiting bigwig would come in and say, "So, Mr. Gray, how are we doing on the project?" And I'd say, "Well, sir, you see, we're right here where we're supposed to be, and we're ahead of schedule here, and we're kind of behind schedule here." And it was an easy way to communicate in a graphical form. It gave them a sense of, okay, everything's okay, or at least, okay, everything is being handled. That's kind of the point. So it's a very good communications tool for determining performance. Basically, I'm giving them a giant Gantt chart. Okay, let me continue. So, progress reports. Some people make a distinction between a progress report and a status report. I think that's semantics, but I'll continue. So, in their way of thinking, A progress report is a periodic report, some sort of a progress, something that basically is probably topic driven. It's most likely, here's the progress in this particular area. If this was a construction job, it's what's the progress for the electrician? Oh, well, he's 3/4 of the way done, all right? That doesn't tell you when the house is going to get built. It just basically, you pick one topic, what's the progress for that? And it could be that this progress report is based upon feedback from other parts of the organization where you pull up. For example, a monthly progress report is probably not a new document. It's just a summary of all the weekly progress reports. And then a status report. And I kind of gathered from their distinction that the status report is a more big picture kind of approach. It's not down in the weeds. It's basically, are we on, maybe the EVM kind of stuff, right? The triple constraints, have I met my quality? Have I met my time? Have I met the money requirements? And then the last one is forecast, and I would recommend you use an earned value management EVM approach for, here's how much I think it's going to cost at the end, and here's how long I think it's going to take to get to at the end. So those are the three kinds of progress report, status report, and forecasts. Kind of weird that they kind of did that out, but anyway. Okay, continuing. So on page 404, they talk about controlling the communications management. So the controlling part, basically its goal, I guess, would ensure optimal flow of information. You've set up this communications plan. Now you got to make sure it works. I mean, for example, you may set up a plan that, Bob is supposed to produce this thing once a week and do this, but Bob's on vacation for 2 weeks, and so what? You just don't do the report, or you send it off to somebody else? Somebody has to be keeping track of all this stuff. It's not just the plan, it's the execution of the plan. Okay. So, it should be fairly obvious from a business perspective that people need information to make decisions. And if you don't provide them the information, they're going to make bad decisions. They have no choice but just to have gut feeling kind of decision making. Well, I don't like it, therefore I think we're going to do this. That's if you, in the absence of information, that's what they're going to do. So you need to make sure that you take action. So info is needed to in order for people to make decisions. So it's your job. If you want the right decision, you need to be providing the right information. The problem here is it's difficult for you, perhaps, to tell how good a job of communicating you are. Most likely, you're probably going to need to borrow somebody. What they talk about in the book is an outside facilitator. That seems a little, complex. What I'd probably do is just borrow some from my organization for 30 minutes and say, so could you look over this and see if there's anything that looks out of place to you? Some sort of like an audit of your communications kind of a thing. Okay. On page 405, they kind of switch gears, and now they're talking about, there's some good stuff in here about suggestions on improving project communication. Yay. So first one is don't assume that everyone is good at communicating. All right? So inside your team, you need to develop better communication skills. There's training out there, okay? I mentioned to you that a lot of companies provide training, technical skills, continuous education thing. Well, they probably need to also have the same kind of thing for how to run a project or how to run a meeting, how to do all that good stuff. So get training for communications. It's just as important as those technical skills, as we mentioned before. Often, if you've ever gone to any of those things, they do role playing. Like, okay, you be the supervisor and you be the employee, and they switch them around and that kind of stuff. Maybe you need some specific training for a particular global or cultural issue. Something that, you need to know that, hey, we're getting ready to talk with these folks from, China. And, their view of how to communicate is slightly different than yours, so you kind of need to know this. For example, in a traditional, type of Chinese kind of a country, it's likely that you won't hear an awful lot of dissent in a public meeting. No, someone's not going to raise their hand and say, well, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. Not that you would hear that much in any other meeting, but it's likely that you're going to have a slightly different tension in the room, so to speak. First of all, another thing is you need to know what's offensive. And let me tell you, when I talk with other people in other organizations across the world, I have to stop and not use slang in a written communication. I don't use contractions because perhaps their English is not as good as mine. I try to stay away from sarcasm and humor, right? I mean, I don't ever say, "Oh yeah, right, that'll work." It sounds good to me, but when it translates into they're so desperately trying to convert it to their native language, they don't really understand the sarcasm. So, slang, contraction, sarcasm, humor, abbreviations, yeah, you kind of need to pay attention. So, and then the cultural issues of, do people feel free to speak their mind, or are they more of the go with the flow kind of people? And you need to know that. Next one they talk about on page 406 is running an effective meeting. So they list a handful of items here. Let's just go through some of them, because this is good stuff. So, the first one, rule for how to have an effective meeting is to make sure you need to have a meeting. Perhaps you can avoid having a meeting. Meetings take up an awful lot of time, particularly if there's like 30 people in the room. That's a hell of a lot of productivity, right? I mean, if each one of those people were making $30 an hour and you had 30 people in the room, you can kind of sort of do the math. This is getting kind of expensive, okay? So you need to determine the purpose of the meeting. The purpose of the meeting is to gather a decision, okay? So purpose and outcome of a meeting, or it could be just to provide information for decision makers or whatever it is, but you need to state what the purpose is. Don't just say, we're having a meeting to discuss the Kumquat project. No. Tell them what it is. You need to determine who are the likely people that need to attend. And don't just say need to attend. You should probably have required and optional attendance. Okay? And just because you invite them doesn't necessarily mean they're going to show up. So you need to kind of keep track of that. Like, I've invited you to the last 3 meetings and you haven't shown. Are you not interested in this anymore, or perhaps the timing is incorrect? Let me know something. Provide an agenda and up front before the meeting starts. So they can look at it and go, okay. The second half of the meeting is going to be on the topic that I'm interested in, right? That kind of stuff. Now, I disagree with this next one. They talk about provide handouts for, like, if you have like PowerPoint slides and stuff. Now, I do not provide handouts up front in my meeting. I have them, and I provide them afterwards, but I do not provide them up front. And let me just explain why. And this is a personal thing, so whatever. I want people to be paying attention to me when I'm talking about them. I don't want their heads to be down, looking at the slides and scribbling notes. I want them to listen to what's going on. And so, me not providing them the slides at the beginning means they have no choice but to pay attention to what's going on in the room, rather than having their heads down. So this is just a technique between heads down or heads up. That's it. All right, let me continue. The next one is run the meeting professionally. Perhaps there's some rules, Robert's Rule of Order and that kind of stuff. What kind of expectations you want. Set the ground rules for how the meeting is going to work. And remember that part of the point of having a meeting is to build and establish relationships, right? It's not just for the purpose of having a PowerPoint slide presentation. Okay, now they missed one. And so I'm going to add one to the list. It's kind of sort of an important one. And that is, start the meeting on time and end the dang meeting on time. Do not waste people's time. Don't mess up other people's schedules. So start on time, end on time. Even if you're in the middle of a heated argument, you need to look at your watch and go, I'm sorry guys, we have to go. We can have another meeting. You pick this thing where you left off, but this meeting needs to conclude now. Okay, and speaking of concluding, we're going to pause this video and pick it up in just a few.